Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Mr. Wood, I'd like to ask you this question. And it's about the role that the Sunnis are going to play in governing their own cities after there has been a clearing. So what happened about a couple of months ago was the Speaker of Iraq's parliament, Salim al-Jabari, came in to visit us, and he said that Shia militia are still in Tikrit and that they hinder stabilization. And last week he was quoted in the Wall Street Journal saying about Tikrit that displaced families have returned, but now there is a feeling that another occupation has begun. The Shia militias and armed groups are still there, imposing their will. This is not what the Sunnis want. Okay, so you look at Ramadi and you look at Mosul, right? So trying to build a coalition to liberate Mosul when the Sunnis back in Tikrit are emailing their cousins saying, this is not working. The Shia is still all around us here. You know, they're not letting this go. And to some extent, the same thing is true over in other parts of Iraq as well. So if you look at Ramadi, you look at Tikrit, and now you're trying to build a coalition up around Mosul to fight ISIS. What's the confidence that a Sunni should have that it's worth dying for? That they're willing to put their necks out on the line if, at the end of the day, the Shia still wind up, blocking them from, in fact, having the kind of control that they've been promised in terms of their regional governments.
I would say this is the single largest factor that will prevent this situation from being resolved anytime soon. And it is a reflection, too, of ISIL's awareness of this long in advance of their taking territory. They observed what happened in the 2000s. They observed the success that the United States and others had in finding Sunni allies, and they made sure that those Sunni allies are not alive. They assassinated huge numbers of possible partners in advance of taking their territory in Mosul and other areas of the Sunni-dominated portions of Iraq. And that means that there is a long road ahead of finding, first of all, Sunni Arabs in Iraq who could stand in as leaders of a post-ISIS situation. In the absence of them, then there would have to be a credible government coming out of Baghdad that does not exist.
So how much does that complicate taking back Mosul if Sunnis don't have the confidence that the Kurds or the Shia militia or the government itself, the Iraqi government, is actually going to ultimately restore Sunni control over that city? Is there not a great deal of additional complexity, difficulty that gets added to that whole effort that can be cured by having Tikrit and Ramadi under Sunni control without interference from the Shia? And what should be done by our government and others to say to the Iraqi government, get out of Tikrit, get out of Ramadi, let the Sunnis control it, let the good people run their own institutions, and then we'll have some confidence that the people in Mosul will rise up and fight. How important will that be?
Vital. And realistically, I think it postpones the liberation of Mosul by, certainly by months, I would say probably by years. The government in Baghdad, of course, is aware of these problems, but is tied in enough with Iran in particular to be unsure that it really wants to solve them. And I think that whatever pressure we can provide to suggest more activity on that front, then we should. Unfortunately, I don't see any quick way to do that. I don't see any pressure that we can provide with the diminished influence that we already have in Iraq. Unfortunately, I don't see a way through it.
Do the other two of you agree with Mr. Wood?
So I think that this is the single largest impediment to stability in Iraq. I think the single largest impediment to dealing with the ISIL problem remains the Assad regime. It's a separate issue. Unless you can convince
In Iraq?
In Iraq.
The Assad issue in Syria is the single biggest obstacle to
In Syria.
resolving
In Syria.
the ISIS issue in Iraq? Is that what you said?
No, it's not what I said.
Oh, so just focus on Iraq then,
Right.
please.
So here we go.
Okay,
In Iraq,
okay.
the biggest issue is the fact that the Sunni minority has no faith in the central government, Shia-led central government.
Should they have faith?
The government is going to have to take steps to enable them to have faith, which it has not yet. And the single biggest problem there is that after Ayatollah Sistani called for Shia to volunteer for military service, instead what happened is people volunteered for militia service, and those militias now appear to be here to stay. The Hajj al-Shabi are meeting with the Ministry of Defense. They're asking for headquarters to be built. To the extent that they are formalized, that is going to make the Sunnis feel much more fear.
So do you agree with Mr. Wood that that could push back by
Without
months
doubt.
or, in fact, years, our ability to liberate Mosul? Do you agree with that conclusion?
I think it will push back by years the ability to have stability in Iraq. It's possible you could still go forward and try and liberate Mosul. Liberating Mosul isn't the issue here. What comes after the liberation of Mosul? If we don't do things now to make sure that the Sunnis have buy-in.
What Mr. Wood is saying is that it does complicate taking back Mosul because you won't have the full support of the Sunnis in that region who are saying it's worth dying for to do it because the post-government structure is very dubious in terms of the respect which will be given to the indigenous Sunni population. You do agree with that?
I agree that it complicates it.
But you don't think it actually reduces then the likelihood that there will be a pushback in the amount of time it will take to liberate Mosul? You think that's an independent question, what happens afterwards? You don't think it actually affects the time frame it takes to actually liberate Mosul?
I don't think you're hearing what I'm saying. So I said yes. I think it does affect the ability to take Mosul. I think that ultimately Mosul could be militarily taken, but it won't be held long unless you have the buy-in from the Sunnis. The wrong way to do it is to have the Shia militias do it. And the last statements from the Iraqi government, the militias are, we, the Shia militias, intend to be at the forefront. That would be disastrous.
Okay, that would be a disaster. And I don't have any more time. Do you agree that would be a disaster? You can just answer yes or no, Mr. Olson. Would that be a disaster?
No, I don't know if it would be a disaster, but obviously all this complicates the effort
Okay, good.
incredibly.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator